So we are just 6 days away from the launch of the Series X, the Series S, and 8 days away from the launch of the PS5, at least in the States. This past week was a very busy week with a lot of things happening in gaming, but since we are just weeks or at max 8 days out of the launch for both the consoles, let's go through an actual comparison of the main consoles, the PS5 disc version and the Xbox Series X. So I know that this has been done a lot of times by other channels, but just to know what was skipped and what was not, I would like to do it from my end also. So let's start with that. So basically both the PS5 and the Series X will cost $500. So the entry point to getting your hand on the next gen consoles is $500, at least the high end ones. So for $500 you get a console, a controller, an HDMI 2.1 compliant cable and a power cable. In the case of PS5 you get a rechargeable controller DualSense with USB-A to USB-C cable included in, and in the case of Series X you get the Xbox controller with a pair of AA batteries. So you need to buy these batteries once they deplete or get rechargeable ones like the Panasonic ones or the Sony ones. We also get a stand for the PS5 and the manual. Here I don't think there is much of a difference, but I'd love it if the Xbox controller came with an inbuilt rechargeable battery like the one on the PS5 or the PS4. A minor inconvenience, but one which is not expected by many in 2020. Now with that out of the way, let's move on to the actual specs. So if we were to look at the actual specs and compare the CPU, GPU, the SSD and the storage, let's see what we get. On the CPU front, the Series X is 200 MHz faster than the PS5 CPU. Both the CPUs are Zen 2 architecture and the CPU of Series X is slightly faster. Whether that will translate into huge real-world gains are hard to say. So for example, if we compare a Zen 2 CPU at similar speeds on the PC, there is almost no difference in FPS, but I'm not sure about consoles, so let's just give the slight edge to Series X, at least on the paper. Now on the GPU side of things, the Series X has 12 teraflops of GPU compute and the PS5 has 10.3 teraflops of GPU horsepower or compute. Here there is no denying that the fact that the Series X is more powerful on paper, and I'm sure that will translate to some extent of improved real-world gaming with higher FPS or resolution. However, the whole thing also depends on optimization, and just because the GPU can do 12 teraflops does not mean that the game can use the entire 12 teraflops, and that is also true for the PS5. So just to prove my point, in the recent Digital Foundry video, they have done an analysis on Watch Dogs Legion and they concluded that the game actually plays the best at the moment on the PS4 Pro and not the One X, because even though the One X has produced a higher resolution, the PS4 Pro is much more stable at 1440p and does not drop as many frames as the Xbox One X. But I'm not saying that this will happen to all the Xbox Series X games. I'm just making the point that optimization is also equally important. So the Series X GPU is slightly more powerful. Now let's talk about the SSD. In the SSD department, the PS5 is definitely superior in terms of speed. But again, how much of a deal is that? From what I've seen so far, the loading times will be a couple of seconds faster. I know that much. But I have installed games on SSDs and hard drives on my PC, and I don't see very much difference in raw FPS whether I install them on the SSD or on the normal mechanical drives. So that we'll have to wait and see. But again, Sony has taken their word from developers, and developers think they can do much more with the SSD. So I think that might translate into newer things and newer ways of doing things on the PS5. Now the last thing about the SSD is also that you just get 825 GB on the PS5, whereas you get 1 terabyte on the Series X. So you can at least take into account that even though the Series X has around 802 or 810 GB of usable memory, and the PS5 will have around 664 or 660 GB of usable memory. You can at least add one game like Red Dead Redemption 2, which is bigger than 100 gigs on the Series X. So that also needs to be kept in mind. But still, that does not do anything to the performance. So let's just say that the PS5's SSD is better, far better as of now. And on the SSD front, the PS5 is definitely better than the Series X. Now the last thing is the RAM or the system memory. Now the system memory, in the case of system memory, both the systems have 16 gigabytes of memory, which is GDDR6. Now the thing is, on the PS5, all of the 16 gigabytes of memory runs at 448 gigabytes per second speed, whereas on the Series X, that is divided into 10 and 6. 10 gigabytes run at 560 gigabytes per second, and the remaining 6 gigabytes run at 336 gigabytes per second. Now how much of a difference that will make, I'm not sure, but let's just call this a draw. So hardware specs wise, the Series X, I feel it's kind of more well-rounded and is also has an edge over the PS5, at least on paper, and I'm sure it will translate to some amount on real world also. Next let's talk about the different technologies supported by the consoles. The first is ray tracing. Both consoles have it. Series X has the Microsoft-led DirectX 12D XR ray tracing, whereas the PS5 has a custom ray tracing solution, but it is very similar to the Series X one because both of them are based on the RDNA2 ray tracing architecture. Now the next one is VRR. VRR will be supported by both the Series X and the PS5, as it is again a part of the HDMI 2.1 specification. But a few things to remember: VRR will not work at 30 FPS. It only works above 48 FPS to around 120 FPS. So most likely, if a game has ray tracing and is running at 4K 30 FPS or something like that, there will be no VRR. Also, for those who don't know, VRR is variable refresh rate, which is equivalent to AMD's FreeSync or NVIDIA's G-Sync, but it's a part of the HDMI 2.1 standard. Similarly, support for 4K at 120 FPS or 8K at 60 FPS, support for enhanced audio return channel or EARC in a TV or soundbar, and also support for ALLM are part of HDMI 2.1 standards. ALLM stands for Auto Low Latency Mode in a TV or a console. For VRR to work, you need both the TV and the console to have VRR. So you cannot just have VRR on your PS5 and your Series X and have a normal TV that does not have it and think it will work. It does not work like that. What VRR basically does is VRR syncs each frame produced by the console with the frame of the TV or monitor to produce a smoother overall experience. So if the in-game FPS drops to 50, the TV or the monitor's FPS or Hertz will also be 50. That is what VRR basically does. Now the next thing, technology is 4K 120 or 8K. Both the consoles support 4K 120 FPS, but I doubt that the resolution will be native 4K, but that is still fine. And 8K resolution is also supported, but I don't think it means that these consoles will run any games at 8K, be it 30 FPS. But it definitely means that 8K content playback is possible at 60 FPS or 30 FPS. So if in the future Netflix starts supporting 8K movies and all that, then yeah, your console can play back that Netflix movie at 8K 60 FPS or 30 FPS, something like that. Now the other technology that is there is ALLM. ALLM will work on the Series X and the PS5, Auto Low Latency Mode. It is not the most coveted feature for a next gen console or TVs to have, but it's fairly important. Technically, it just switches your TV to game mode, which uses the least latency for better input lag. So basically, you don't have to manually turn on game mode, but there is a bit more to it than just that. If ALLM is supported by the console and the TV, it's actually intelligent in the sense it has to be set up once. That means you don't have to turn it on every time you switch your console on. And the best thing is it recognizes when you are playing a game on the console or simply watching something on Netflix or Amazon Prime on the console. So it automatically turns on all the processing of the TV while watching Netflix on your Xbox. But at the same time, if you switch to gaming, it will turn all those processing off to give you the best input lag. Currently, I'm using this on my Samsung QLED and the Xbox One X, so it works really well, but it's not the same for the PS4 Pro as it does not support ALLM. Minor inconveniences create a big impact in the long run, so just remember that. Having to switch again and again between Netflix and game mode is like a pain, so I wouldn't want to do that. So if there is support for ALLM, it is best. Now the other technology is VRS. Now VRS is the next tech that we need to look out for. It is variable rate shading. VRS allows developers to selectively reduce the shading rate in areas of the frame where it won't affect visual quality, letting them gain extra performance in their games. The technology was developed by Nvidia in their Turing architecture, and basically what it does is the not so noticeable parts in an image are shaded with lesser pixels or lesser intensity, saving up resources and in turn increasing the frame rate. The technology is there in the Xbox Series X and the S, but it's not there in the PS5. However, the PS5 has its own custom geometry engine and foveated rendering, which actually tracks your retina. That is supposed to complement what the Xbox Series X has as VRS. And lastly, we have one more technology called mesh shading. This is also another technology introduced by Nvidia. Now it's there in RDNA 2 and is present in the Xbox Series X, and again the PS5 has its custom geometry engine to counter this feature, which also has a form of mesh shading of its own. So now that we are done with the technical stuff, and I would say both are almost at parity with each other. It's just that in terms of raw power, the Series X is a bit ahead, and also there were a few things that I did not mention, that is Dolby Vision gaming. Well, Dolby Vision gaming is, I think, still far away, so let's not bring that into picture at the moment. And the other thing was whether the Xbox Series X has Infinity Cache or not, which are there in the new AMD GPUs that are coming. And I've skipped that also because I'm not sure whether it makes such a huge difference, and even if the PS5 has it or not, I am not even sure about that. There are rumors that the PS5 has Infinity Cache, but whether that makes a huge performance difference is another thing. So unless we actually see that in action, I cannot vouch for it, so we have skipped that part also. So the two things we have skipped is Dolby Vision HDR gaming on the Xbox Series X and S, and whether that will be on Sony's PS5 or not whenever that comes. And the other thing is that whether or not Sony's PS5 actually has Infinity Cache, because we know for sure that maybe Xbox Series X and S do not have Infinity Cache, and whether that will make a big difference in gaming or not, we are not sure at the moment. So we just skip those two technologies. Now let's talk about backwards compatibility. Here the Series X easily beats the PS5 because almost all the previous Xbox One and 360 titles are playable, which is not the same for PS5. And they are also enhanced, so you should remember that. In Sony's case, 99% of PS4 titles are playable on the PS5, but we don't know about the PS3 and PS2 games. So if you just want the PS4 games to be working on your PS5, then there's no problem. However, if you want to play a PS3 game or a PS2 game, We don't know about that at the moment. Next, let's talk about subscription services. Here again, the Series X will win because of Game Pass. So of course, Game Pass has a huge collection of games, and I know it does not have all the best games in the world, but it has a decent amount of games for a very reasonable price. So it wins hands down compared to the PS Plus collection or the PS Plus at the moment that is there. Even on the cloud service, I think the Xbox Cloud is better than PS Now. So on the subscription side, the Series X wins. So there are so many kinds of subscription in Xbox. Like you can actually get the console as a subscription, paying monthly for the next 2 years, which is like crazy, right? I mean, a nominal amount. I kind of forgot it. It's I think $25 or $35 for the Series X monthly, but that is also a subscription. So PS5 does not let you do that. You have to drop $500 and then you get the console. So subscription wise, Xbox is right there. Next, let's talk about exclusive games. Now this is a very important topic, and on exclusive games, the PS5 wins hands down, as some of the best games of last gen and the upcoming gen are on the PS5. And I know that Xbox now owns Bethesda, but until they actually deliver quality games, I mean the quality of God of War, Ghost of Tsushima, Uncharted 4 and things like that, let's just not go into that. Once they take out a few games which are of that quality, then we can definitely go into the exclusives part. So at the moment, PS5 wins the exclusives thing. Now let's talk about VR games. So even though VR is not the main deal, I know it's not a big deal at the moment, but Sony is the leader in VR market, and with a market cap of 37% by the end of 2019, they continue to grow year after year. And of course, PSVR is backwards compatible on the PS5, and all the games are also backwards compatible. So if you want a console with VR, PS5 is the only way, as Xbox does not do VR at all. And also it is one of the cheaper VR implementations, at least that's what I've seen, and it's pretty decent. It's not bad in any way. And of course the PS5 I think will improve the VR. It's not expensive like some of those VR headsets that came up, the Vive, HTC Vive, Oculus and all that. It's way cheaper. So we are almost done with most of the things. Now the only thing that we are left with is something which we did not expect. So now I'm sure most of you guys know that the PS5 and the Xbox Series X review units are out, and it's in the hands of the journalists. So definitely there is one more added point on the PS5 side, and that is the new DualSense controller. The haptic feedback that is there is absolutely insane, and there is no comparison for the Xbox controller. I know the Xbox controller is better because I use it all the time on the PC, but this time around the PS5 controller feels really good, and the haptics is just so insane and so good that I don't think Microsoft can compare this way. So they'll have to probably, if this becomes like a thing wherein a lot of developers start using the haptics and implement it in their games, then Microsoft will have to make a new controller which has something similar or is as good as that. So that is another huge plus point, because if you go and see most of the videos, including Digital Foundry and other famous YouTubers and other sites, what they say is the most next gen thing in this year's console war is the PS5 DualSense. So that is the most next gen thing. I mean, most people have never experienced something like that. So yeah, that's where we are. So we have compared everything on paper. Maybe I'll have another episode where I talk about the essence of maybe getting a Series S or a digital version of the PS5, and we'll take that from there. But for now, I think they have their own things. I mean, if you want an overall cheaper deal or a better deal, not essentially a better deal, but a cheaper deal, then you should go for the Series X, because you can get it in installments or subscription for 2 years, or you can pay downright $500 and subscribe to Game Pass and have a lot of titles, which, yeah, I mean, 60% of them are pretty decent, some of them are really good. But if you want the best games, some of the best games, and the new haptics and all the new experiences and VR and stuff like crazy exclusive games and all that, then you have to go with Sony. But then Sony is a bit expensive, and Sony may be slightly underpowered compared to the Series X, but we don't know that yet until we see actual analysis videos from Digital Foundry with third-party games. So you have to choose one of them. As of now, I still feel like for me the PS5 is a better deal, because I have a very good gaming PC and I have the One X also, and as per Microsoft will still support the One X and the One for the next 2 years. So why should I buy the Series X? And on top of that, I have a PC with a 2070 Super, which is okay, weaker than the Series X, but there are a lot of things which you can change in the PC to just make things work on 4K and 1440p. So yeah, and it has ray tracing and it has DLSS, so the DLSS helps a lot in a lot of games. So I would always play Cyberpunk 2077 on my PC rather than a Series X. So in that sense, for me it's like a no-brainer. I would not actually have to have a Series X at the moment, but yeah, if I get a chance, I would like to have the PS5. But the problem right now is, in my country, that is India, there is still no release date confirmation for the PS5, and that is a crazy thing, right? So with that, I'll end this video. Like, share and subscribe to my channel Orcus Gaming Corner, and in the next video we'll discuss a bit about the Series S and the digital edition of PlayStation 5 and who should buy which consoles, basically that.